Welcome to the SJ Child Show. This episode is sponsored by Water and Body Basics. Visit 3440 South, 5600 West, West Valley City, Utah. Mention SJ Childs today.
Welcome back to the SJ Child Show. Enjoy part 2 with Mateo Rodriguez.
So when I was 12 years old, I didn't know that being, gay was bad. And again, it's not bad. I know that now, but
of course, yeah.
And so we were just sitting at the table and two girls were sharing their crushes and I said my crush's name. And that's how I pretty much outed myself and didn't realize that it was going to be a mess. And so unfortunately that led to a lot of bullying in the classroom and on the soccer fields, if I was going near their soccer ball, like, oh no, that's flirting with me, get away. I'm like, I'm just playing the game, so it started to become things like that, physical bullying on the field. Eventually I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. I left the team. And so that spread into the classroom from there. So it was just different remarks, different rumors. And it started off very middle school, like, okay, this is drama. It's still painful. But then it escalated because that was the same year we started to go into the locker rooms. And so accusations like, oh, he's looking at me when I'm changing. Like, that's not, that's something I would never do. But either way, like, they were just so scared of the homophobia that they're like, all right, you go change elsewhere. So we were going to have a field trip that year of, like, we're all going to be in the same cabin overnight. It's going to be 5-day field trip overnight. And they didn't want, the bisexual girl in the same room as them. So they made up a rumor actually based off of, it was pretty intense. I don't know if you remember the Virginia Tech shooting of 2007.
Yeah.
That was all over the news. And there was a big push in the media, which I was so angry about. And this is really important we talk about this because they kept saying, oh, that guy was autistic or he had mental illnesses and that's why he did that. And that's just not factually correct at all how autism or mental illness works.
Absolutely.
More likely to be the victims. But because that narrative was pushed around the nation, a lot of schools, including mine, all of a sudden had a zero tolerance policy saying any threat would not be investigated. Then you're suspended. First, you're going to be suspended, then you'll investigate. And so to make sure that I didn't go on that field trip, they made up a rumor, oh, well, Mateo's autistic. He's going to kill the girl because, she didn't reciprocate feelings for him, which is a complete lie. And hopefully, I would hope that any adult would be like, okay, that's clearly a rumor, but unfortunately, when I was being constantly portrayed as like the bad autistic kid because I had behaviors, and again, not related to anything about me being gay, but just like different outbursts in class because I was having meltdowns. Like, it was easy to paint me as that demon.
Weren't getting support.
Right. So the school automatically believed that rumor and suspended me that day. And they told me I had to go to the hospital and say, like, yeah, we have to make sure that you're not homicidal. I'm like, I'm 12 years old. Like, I'm not homicidal. What? But either way, I went. And because I at the time was suicidal from being bullied, they admitted me to that hospital. And so being 12 years old and going to hospital, that's already scary enough. But that was also during the Catholic sex abuse scandal that was going on in Catholic hospitals. And I went to a Catholic hospital and that's ended up what happening. So I left and I was just never the same ever again. That was a very intense summer. So my parents, I was very angry at them at that time, being like, you're the adult. Why didn't you put a stop to this?
Yeah.
And they very much said, well, we had to listen to professionals. And so I realized that that's where my RID really started to flare up and lasted for a very long time of it's a lot of uncertain, like, I guess anger that I didn't explore till years later because I was just so mad about it.
Sure.
I was like, you just drove me there. You didn't question it. You didn't fight for me. There was nothing. You just took me there. That's what happened. That can never be undone. And then the rest of the summer, I lived actually, unfortunately, right across from my school. I kid you not. It was like the worst time to be living across from your own school.
Right.
But because people would see me outside to be on my swing, for me, like that was my therapy, was being on my swing all day. People would actually stop at my house. Like, parents would drive to my house, talk to me on the swing, which is so inappropriate now that I look back and I look, why are you talking to a 12-year-old? Asking me what happened, do you have plans to kill anybody? And which is just awful. But they were sending hostile phone messages to my family back when home phones were more of a thing, and emails telling me to stay away from the kid. So I was very much painted as this very potentially violent autistic guy, and that was a stigma that I carried for a long time. After really that's not what it was. It was a combination. Now I had this horrible trauma happen. Now I had the school that was gunning for me to get out, and that the shift wasn't from like, oh, I was the cute little autistic kid anymore. Now it was like this the demon teenager that we have to look out for. So that shift happened real quick when I was 12. So for RID for me, that's when everything resurfaced, because for a while I wasn't paying attention to it. I just had more of the adoption issues, like, where's my family? Like the very typical adoption process of I want to know. And I actually found my family. I found my biological family in 2007. Ironically, 1 week before all that happened, by the way, which is wild.
Wow.
1 week. So it was from the highest point to my lowest point within 6 days. So yeah, it was very intense. The RID was very intense. After that, I wanted nothing to do with my parents. It was really hostile, and I'll openly admit that, like, it was nothing violent, like where I was physical towards them, but it was just very much like, I don't want to talk to you, get away from me, and that's why it only just
Felt
spiraled from there.
betrayal.
Yeah. It's like, how I still sometimes, even now, I'm like, you know what? My parents weren't the only adults, so why couldn't this be stopped? And I just point to
Yeah.
stigma. It was stigma from the media that was
Agreed.
pointing to autism and mental illness that made it so easy for them to blame me. And then keep in mind too, this is before I was male. This is back when I was like a 12-year-old girl. So even that, when you think of that context, it's even a little more ridiculous. I'm not trying to stigmatize boys, but like, you think that even they think like, okay, this is like a 5-foot, 12-year-old girl, like, she's not gonna do anything.
Right.
So yeah, that's why I delved a little bit deeper for
Oh,
context. But yeah,
goodness.
that's RID really flared from there. That I was just really, yeah, it was not a good time. It was not a good
Yeah.
time. And so I think that RID needs to be talked about, that it's about trauma and healing and not about behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes behavior gets thrown around all the time, even in the autism world, all the
It's
time.
awful.
Like, everything's behavior, and this is a lot of behaviors today. It's like, no, like, there's a lot of distress today.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of resurfacing of trauma today. We have to change how we, how we talk about it. Actually, I saw a post, so I'm not going to take credit for this, but I saw a post saying that regarding attention-seeking behavior, which I've always hated that term anyway, call it connection-seeking behavior. I'm like, wow, actually, yeah, that's really what it is. That even like, if you think a child has no reason to do something, like if they're doing it, there's a reason, even if they can't name it themselves. And it's not the child's job to have to explain to adults what's going on.
No.
It's adults' job. So I think a
Exactly.
lot of that was stressful for me because I always had to be the one digging deeper. I think that's why I know so much about myself now when I explain things in post, because I couldn't verbalize it back then, but I understood what was going on, and I was frustrated that nobody else could figure this out. Because to me, it was like, how do you not see I'm hurting from this?
Yeah.
Like, how can I go through all of that in May 2007 and have everyone just still call it autism after? Like, yes, it was like, that still didn't go away, but like, you can't blame any of like anything entirely on one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh
So,
my
yeah,
gosh, that's so overwhelming. When did you decide to come out to your parents? And then what was that process like? Did they support you when you went through your process or anything?
Oh, for transitioning?
Yeah.
So that was actually after college. That was a really rough process. We're okay with it now, but that took a very long time.
Yeah.
Because I think, and actually it took me a while. Actually, my therapist pointed this out 2 months ago, because I was saying like, I was mad that they asked me to leave the house, because I was like, all this just to be like, okay, bye,
Mhm.
But she pointed out that what happened in 2007 was not just a trauma for me. My parents wouldn't tell me at the time because I was 12, but it was probably trauma for them too. People calling your house and stopping at your house and harassing you and all of that. So I think that they were just so scared after how I was known to be bisexual, which is just like, you just like just because you like somebody and you're going through all that. I think they were just so scared of the extra stigma about being trans, because it's even worse in our society, unfortunately, to be seen as that. And not saying trans is bad, it's not,
Sorry.
but just how society treats us statistically is really exponentially worse.
I'm so sorry.
So thank you. So I think my parents were just scared. I think my parents were scared, and I think that's why they said like, this isn't gonna work out. You need to leave. And so unfortunately, that was a real. Also, everything in my life seems to be bad timing. Everything kind of rains and pours.
Yeah.
Because it was in August 2017 was when I came out as trans, and then 3 weeks later is when I became physically disabled. The whole wheelchair situation and all that. And so at the time I was begging them, like, let me stay, figure this out. Like, I'm going to way too much right now. Like, nope, like, we're not doing this. So I think that if anything, it resurfaced the RID. So I didn't talk to them for a long time. Because I was very mad that, I was slowly losing my physical abilities. You guys take off to Florida and you say I have to leave. Like, it was a whole thing. But about like a year later, we started talking more, and they still were referring to me as my old name and old pronouns. And I was like, all right, we're not getting anywhere. But over time, I think that with hormones, they started to look silly if they were calling me by my old name or referring to me
Yeah.
as trans.
Yeah,
I think
right.
to them, if anything, it made it more complicated. But I think they also had time to wrestle with it. And so I've done presentations for parents of trans kids in Boston, and like I try to have a compassionate approach to a little bit of like, when your kid is trans, you think about this for a long time, whether we have the language for it or not. We feel a certain way since we're little about something, even if we can't put the words for it. I didn't have the lingo back then. If I did, I would have came out when I was a kid,
Yeah.
But for the parents, that might be the first time they're hearing like those terms when we are coming out to them. Not just about what transgender is, but like hearing like their own kids say, I'm feeling this way. For us, we've thought about it for years. And for them, this is the first time, which is why there's such a big gap in like why we're not meeting where we're at. So I do try to understand that, but I think what I tell parents, and also same thing like when you're talking to your kid about being autistic too, I think the same thing applies here. So I don't know if you hear my service dog.
I
Tilly,
do.
Tilly, stop. Sorry.
You're so fine. No, it's
Yeah,
great.
no, she's cute, but she's just decided to snore. Um,
Maybe.
cute. Is that like just take time to process it and then come back? Like not everything has to be said right there.
Yeah.
You can just thank your kid for telling you if they come out to you as gay or trans.
Yeah.
Take time to process it if it is a negative feeling for you, and like explore why that's a negative feeling for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not always even just about hating or religion. Sometimes it's like you're scared for your child's safety, or you're scared for how your family will see you because of stigma. Like it's more complex than people realize. But sometimes unfortunately there is people that just hate us, and that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah. Seriously.
When you hear that your kid is autistic, whether it's from a doctor or a neuropsych eval or anything, you don't have to tell them like that day, but take time to sit and process it so you are prepared to put it in a way that's positive and carry the conversation forward. So I try to tie those two things together because actually, I don't know if you know this, but I think it's 8 times more likely to be transgender if you're autistic. Yeah, there's actually studies about it.
Yeah. In fact, I did do another interview with a gentleman who runs a company in California who helps train and employ autistic adults in like animation and acting and all sorts of different things. And he and I discussed that as well. And he told me some statistics that he knew. And that was the first time I had known that. So that was exciting for me to learn that too. So yeah, I think that it's really important that we embrace and celebrate all aspects. I, for one, have 2 girls that are not diagnosed, but so I know that they are on the spectrum, and a son who's diagnosed, a husband on the spectrum. I love autism. I know that people think of when they see challenges or things, and they might not understand why I even say that. But it's because I have a different perspective and I have the unique ability to see them for who they are as humans. And I see them for their unique talents and the beauty that they bring to the world. And I hope that, right away, we're building these trust relationships with our kids where they feel free to tell us at that moment and as a child, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And is this different or is this okay? I never want that conversation to be something that isn't able to happen in our home. And we really try to foster that independence. Like I said, their own biology, I always tell parents, your kid has their whole life to go to the bathroom on the toilet. They also have their whole life to eat a sandwich. So don't force these things. It's like the craziest thing ever to, and there's so much pressure from the schools and from the therapists.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? Fire the doctor, fire the therapist, fire the school, find the right place. Find 50 places. Sorry, you have to go through so much to find them, but why wouldn't you? Isn't that what you're supposed to do as a child? Or I'm sorry, as a parent, is find the best things and the ways for your child to have their best life, right?
Right. And honestly, I would also tell parents to trust their instincts in a lot of things
100%.
too. I think there's a lot of gaslighting that I've seen, even with like just sitting in meetings with my parents, but as I got a little older and I was able to sit them, I'm like, I think my parents, again, I'm not trying to make this about bashing my parents, but I want to
no, and I'm sure that you love them. That's why you're doing this. Yeah.
Right. And I try to word this as kindly as I can. I certainly would have done it as a teenager. I was a lot more brash with how I said it. But I think that they had a very naive approach. That everything the professional said had to be right because they went to college.
It's crazy.
They've done this for X amount of years. And I think that when you're living with it as a person who is autistic, or you have an autistic child, and that's your life, that's how you like function every day, is like learning to live with it. It's very different from somebody who sat in a class even for a semester about it.
100%.
And that literature is so outdated, even just from like the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, even 2010, I've seen some like things that I'm like, wow, this is really outdated how we view this now.
Seriously.
So we have to understand that we're always learning. We're never going to always get it right. But like, I don't think that allies of autistic people are people who are perfect. I think they're people that are repairing, that they repair harm that's been done, that they don't make it, oh, harm hasn't been done. It's like, no, like harm's been done. Now what will I do about it? How will I make things like better for both of us? And I think part of that is being able to take a step back and trust your gut and be like, you know what, this doctor, I don't like how he's talking to my kid. Or this doctor, I don't know, he's doing some things seem a little quacky or seems a little outdated. you know? And so if you're starting to feel like I'm getting some red flags, because I've seen some posts, even some like groups I'm in, like, oh, this therapist does this and doesn't sit with it right. And I'm reading, I'm like, whoa, like this is like a serious red flag. Like, this person shouldn't have a job, you know? And will hide behind the concept of behaviorism, like, oh, it has to be done because of A, B, C, D, and that's just not how life works.
No.
And actually, that's something that did me a lot of harm when everything was so overstructured for me that once I left that environment of special education, I just had outside supports just to help me function in life. I was like, what do I do? Like, this is just not how the real world works. And it was actually, looking back, and it's actually really upsetting to me that I missed out on a lot of time to be a kid. That when I could have gone to that cookout, no, I had therapy. And the therapy was training me like for the real life. And like, you know what? Like, no matter what, this is real life. Kids are experiencing real life right now.
Yes, certainly.
Everyone always says like, oh, we got to prepare for the real world. Like, no, this is the real world right now. And they're a kid. They shouldn't have to train to be an adult. And like you said, that they have the rest of life to make a sandwich. Like, they also have the rest of the world telling them what's wrong with them and that they can't do something. And our job's to tell them otherwise.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Because kids learn their values and how they see themselves first from their families. That's why it's a big responsibility. And that's why I talk to parents as often as I do, because I know a lot of them only hear negative things about autism because a lot of the movies are just so over dramatized or just so inaccurate that that's the only thing they see about it. So when they hear about it, that's what they have. And so I try to point out, like, no, this is actually like what it is. It's a wide, like, there's so many things. It's a big category, and it's just not these two opposite sides. And even the sides aren't even accurate, honestly. It's not a linear step. It's not linear at all. I see it more like a circle, honestly, where you just float around.
Yeah. I have a little program that I put together once for a corporation, and I called it 5.5 steps of autism, because there are no steps. It's a step and a half and a step and a half and a quarter of a step and a third of a step. It's not even like a full step process. It is a flexibility of everything.
I try to see things, everything is a journey, not everything has to be a destination. And I feel like in a lot of autism programs, everything's about goals. And part of it's just the IEP culture. It's always like by blah, 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 by 80%. I'm like, okay. And it gets like weird with percentages too. That's a whole other side, right? I'm like, how do you measure it by 80%? I don't know. But I'm like, sometimes I read, like, again, I was only counselor for a short time before I became physically stable and couldn't do it anymore. But sometimes I'd read this, I'm like, wow, like, they're really not giving this person permission to be human. Like, they can have a bad day. I don't have to document every single little thing, because that became a thing too, where when they're so focused on destination and changing everything. I get documentation is important when you're trying to find the root of why somebody's is like dealing with distress or discomfort. But when everything's documented, you're painting a certain picture of somebody, that's when it's like, I don't like that.
I agree.
I felt like everything, no matter what I did, had to be documented. And I even said something, even as a teenager, even as a 12-year-old, like, why does this have to be written down? Like, I'm seeing this and this is dehumanizing. And it makes me feel bad, you know? And they say, oh, well, we need an accurate clinical picture. That was always their go-to. Or, oh, this is help you with your long-term end goals. It's like, you know what? If you have a bad day and you yell about it, where's it going to be? It's not going to be in your file for everybody to read. It's not going to be talked, reminisced about in the break room. Like, I feel like there's just a power dynamic that we have to be really mindful when we're talking about disabled people, especially autistic people, that where a lot of our so-called treatments are based on behavioralism. So I think it just comes down to letting people be human. Like, I can have a bad day, and and honestly just like, if we have to swear, okay, we swear, because we're human. Like, it was always, I felt like we're always held to a higher standard because the end goal was to appear neurotypical, but neurotypical people got away with murder, you know, within my environment. They were doing things I wouldn't even dream of, because I would be punished with either ABA or punished with it was always like reward punishment. And even that gets to be tricky, because like I think rewards at first, years ago, I was like, oh, this is like a good thing. But as I got older, I'm like, wow, like now I'm associating rewards like when I do something for somebody else or when I perform something, it's not as much of a reward for me. So even that, I try to tell people, like, careful with that. Like, it's good to reward somebody if they did something that's actually on their own terms, but when you're bribing somebody, it starts to not feel as good later, you know?
Definitely. I think you'll like this little story. I wasn't laughing at you or anything. I had to giggle a couple times, because when my son was, 4 or 5, when he was just starting ABA, there was a time where he would start his own data compilation, and he had his own worksheets, and because he had that photographic memory, would write his own, and then he would do it to her. He would take data on the ABA therapist. Yes.
He's going places.
I knew you'd love that.
And I need to be his child, because that was me. I love it.
Yes, he would
Oh.
have, and I'm sure we still have them in files and things, his little data, taking his little data down, and he would say, okay. And then he would want to take data with me and take data with, family members. It was just the
Oh
sweetest
my
thing.
God.
And luckily, like,
Didn't like that.
and just like you said, it's so hard as a parent to think that you're doing the right thing because this professional said so and that professional said so. So I hope that, interviews like this can really bring light and scope of information and awareness to parents and to new parents coming, grandparents, whatever it is, therapists. I hope that we can, really bring them a good sense of maybe how to do things a little differently and not cause trauma and, those kind of things for our kids. It was when our son found therapists that sat down on the floor and played games with him and became his friend that he started to develop the real connections we were hoping he could find in the world. And it wasn't like he didn't have it with us, but it was, we wanted him to have it with friends, and yeah. And so I think it is so important to maybe talking about goals, like what's your end goal for your child? You want them to be happy. That should be your end goal. Help them to get there. Like, don't hold them back by changing their behavior to fit in a way that looks good or feels like your neighbors will accept it. Like, that's not what we should be doing in raising children and in being parents, not at all.
Right, I agree. No, I fully agree. And I think that's like a healthier way of looking at it for like the family too. It allows you to be free from that stigma, and like the stares start to bother you a lot less once you start to realize like this is a society problem and not a me problem. Because a lot of the times even parents say like, I want to accept my kid, but I feel like it makes me look like a bad parent if they're doing certain things. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like for example, like stimming, like if I flopped my hands, and I still flop my hands a lot every single day actually. But when I did that, that had me sit in my hands, and that just made me feel very bad. And the longest time was from 11:20 to 2 o'clock one day in the hall, and I was like, wow, they're just making me feel bad. Flapping didn't hurt anybody, it wasn't all destructive. But like, so like I say, like don't replace a stim or stop a stim unless it's harming somebody else or it's genuinely destructive.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if your kid is in a library and your kid's screeching, like, okay, I can see why that the parent might panic thinking like this is a problem. Because I mean, obviously, like not, again, everything's not all or nothing. Like that is a problem. But like
environmental.
Yeah, there are ways to like let them still be their artistic self and not cause a disruption. So like for me, when I used to have my full blown screeching, they taught me how to grunt instead because it was quieter. Yeah, it's still a vocal stim.
Yeah,
but it's not as disruptive, and also my parents felt less stigmatized. I think because when a kid's screaming, there's a lot of things that be going on. Like either one, people think they're a brat, or two, they think the parent's causing harm, and like no parent wants to feel like that. When I want to validate that, so that's what I'm saying. Like it doesn't have to be all nothing. Like you don't have to make your kid feel bad because they're panicked about how other people see it. It's not a good cycle to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Just gotta be prepared to like, I don't know, just teach your kid like where certain stims are okay, and that if you're not in the environment, we have to be as worried about it. Let them be.
So I have a really great question for you that you're here now with me because, I can just run this by you. So this is a little thing that I created for, I have a group on Facebook called the Autism Advocate Support Group. And so I'm going to send you an invitation, obviously, because I think there's so much value and the community is about 500. They're the most amazing, supportive people. Like there's no negative talks. And when there is questions or like, concerns, everybody is so loving and so friendly and wonderful. And I'm so proud of them actually, as the group owner or whatever, like I love it.
Yeah, no,
I'd love to be a part of it. So I created these, they're called a vehicle emergency safety kits. And it is a personal profile for your child or adult or teen, whatever you need for your individual with needs, some fidget toys, masks, earplugs, things like that. And on the back is communication board and just some really simple things to just try to help because nobody anticipates an emergency happening, especially in their vehicle with their child. And so I'm just trying to bring as much help to the responders and the families to bridge that gap in helping them. What would you say, like if a child or as an autistic adult, what would you feel like if like there was a lanyard that said like, I have autism, please be patient, would you feel like that would be more of a demeaning process or more of an educating process for those around them? Because that's something that I'm thinking about maybe doing as a process in, but it's great for me to get this great feedback from you now to find out what you think.
I think it will really depend on each family and each child, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think there's no universal answer because I've seen this discussed on many pages.
Yeah.
I think so, just because there's certain factors, right? Like, I feel like for something like a little kid that can't talk, like I think there's gonna be a lot more mercy, and maybe that's not gonna be as necessary. But if somebody might have more like stimming behaviors in an emergency where they're more nervous and they think that they're gonna be either on drugs or under the influence, like that's gonna be maybe more appropriate. So an officer will see that and be like, okay, like maybe I'll pause and not assume. Because there has been videos. Actually, I'll give an example. At one of my old colleges, I was switching colleges because they were ableist and terrible, and even got me kicked out, which is a whole other story. But back when I was president of their disability club, one of my members called me frantic, saying, the police just picked me up on campus, and I was like, okay, what's going on? He said, like, well, I was watching, and he's autistic. He was watching a SpongeBob video outside on his break. He wasn't bothering anybody, but he was stimming to it because he was laughing, and the officer thought he was intoxicated. And so he was down the police station. I went in there and explained, like, listen, like, I know him, he's harmless, blah, 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 and they let him go. But like, and I'm thinking, like, would that have actually helped if he had that? And the answer is, I don't know. Could it have stigmatized him more? And because again, there's still a lot of stigma about autism.
Absolutely.
So it's a really complex decision that I think has to fall in the hands of the person and or the family that is able to communicate with them, like, if the person's able to, like, even signal non-verbally, like, hey, yes or no to them. Because it's such a personal decision. Like, there's times where I felt like that could have protected me, but then I look back and I'm like, actually, like,
maybe it was
people
better.
knew I was autistic, and I went through all that because they knew. So there's no answer. So I think it's okay to send those to families and let them make that personal decision with their kids and not be like, oh, look at this is great, and then put it on them, especially if the kids and they can't consent to it and then they're just wanting it off and
absolutely,
like, that's not what we want either. I think we want to use those to encourage autonomy and to have those conversations of like what to do when you're approached by an officer, because if we're gonna be honest, at least in the United States, we know that officers aren't always so
we're trying to work on that in our community too.
Definitely. And to be honest, I think we just need to name it that, like, racism is a thing, systemic racism is a thing. I mean, I'm Indigenous. I've gotten 3 sprains from police officers. Being autistic didn't change that. Even me being visibly in a wheelchair didn't change that. They dragged me out and said they'll bring my wheelchair out to me. So sometimes as much as I like to think that medical bracelets are a buffer, that's not always going to be the case for everybody, and for each family to decide that, especially if, like, there are Black families saying, like, I don't know if it's put more of a target on their back. But I've seen other families be like, actually they have a sign in the yard saying, like, if you were an officer and you approach and you see that, it's unfortunate, because, like, honestly, I wonder, like, is this a lot more autonomy? It's there's no right answer.
I agree.
Like, yes, this is what you do, but I think it comes down to each family and the different privileges they have or disadvantages they have or different systemic barriers. So I wish I could be like, yes, this is great.
No, I think that's the best answer.
That's good. I think that's a good conversation starter. And so send it out and let the families decide.
Definitely.
And let the person decide, most importantly.
Yeah.
Because I think there's sometimes where I might think like, oh, this will help. And other times I'm like, wow, this actually did me a lot more harm when I had mine on. Because I actually have something like that.
Yeah, we had just Halloween time is really hard because everybody has these expectations when you go around the neighborhood and you're supposed to trick or treat, and our son was always like, oh, they're opening the door, I can go in, I can talk to them, I can ask them what their periodic table element is. He was so excited about all this stuff, but people had like, whoa, we're caught off guard. Like felt like I was always like, look, my kid just wants to trick or treat. Like I was always on defense. I was always making excuses. I was always like, oh, like, sorry, I'm sorry. And my husband was always like, stop apologizing for us. Like, this is making me so angry. And I was like, I'm sorry to everyone else.
No, honestly, it's my experience. And honestly, I've done a lot of thinking about this Halloween thing, because I see this every year, especially when those blue pumpkins went around. I have a lot of feelings about that blue pumpkin. Yeah. You know what I'm referring to. But like, it was just, I got really mad about it because honestly, children, whether they are neurotypical or autistic, should not have to apologize on Halloween. If you are going to be giving out candy to children, you're going to be dealing with children, and kids are going to act like kids. They might show up to your door, might be a jerk. They might show up to your door and not say thank you, but you know what? It's trick or treat. They're getting candy, and you as an adult have to understand they're kids. And if their parents have to teach them something, they'll do that on their own time. You're not step in and be a parent. So if your kid's going there and socializing, honestly, like, I would have loved that. I love Halloween because kids come to my door, and I used to work with kids. So like, I get excited. And honestly, if they came in and started making conversations, I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to be like, oh, why is this kid talking to me? So it sounds like those people that were defensive, that's a their problem. That's not a you problem. That's not your son's problem.
Well,
they're trying to make it a problem.
I gave them a little bit of a heads up this next time around. So there was, 2 years ago or whatever, he was Garfield, and I just put, I have autism, please be patient on his little costume. And everyone was so kind to him and patient, and they responded correctly. Like they were great, and they gave us the support that I was looking for. And I hope that they were able to, because we've lived here for a decade. So they probably were like, oh my gosh, this is the same kid that asked me what my car model was last year. And I was like, what? Why are you asking me this? This kind of like, he's not going to take your social security number, I promise. Like,
right. And that's to me, like, I'm glad they responded so well, and that's a great thing. And I'm glad it worked. I'm just sad that we live in a world where we feel like we have to do that.
Exactly.
Honestly, again, let me know if you want me to use clean language.
Yeah, do that so I don't have to edit.
Okay, I was gonna say. But yes, don't be a jerk to children.
Yeah,
don't be a
real.
jerk to children. That's all it has to take. Whether they're that's why I honestly, I mean, even like for Halloween, I'm kind of like hesitant about if my parents made me wear that, I would feel upset. And I'm not saying that's like how your son felt. I can't speak for him, but for me, I loved it. But he doesn't have this. Again, like, it's every family's decision. So for him, that works. But for me, I feel like I would just feel upset because like it's just, why do I have to wear this to not be mistreated?
Yeah,
I don't think why is the conversation
he has that like understanding, or he doesn't display to us that he has a feeling of how others feel about him. He hasn't expressed those to us.
He might not have it yet at his age.
Exactly. It's only 11. So exactly. We're just, and we'll support whatever.
Okay,
yeah. So it's just, and I think where he's at, and like I said, hopefully he'll come in so you can say hello to him and meet him at some point. But I think we're going to probably put this into a 2-part because we've gone for so long, which I think is fantastic because we covered so many amazing topics. And I think there's so much great value in the time that we've had today. And so I hate to even have to wrap it up or anything, but where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you, if that's something that's okay on social media or whatever? Do you have a website? Let us know where we can get a hold of you.
So I have a blog. It's called The Activistic Autistic. I'm going to send you a link in case you want to include it under. We'll
definitely do
podcast. That. So it's a newer one. It's only been around since 2019, but they're still posting it like pretty much every other day. But I'm available by inbox. I always get back to people. Even if it's like a few days delay, I always get back because that's why I'm here. So reach out at any time.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I just love, we could just keep going. I'm sure. Keep talking. We're going to have to make a part 3 and 4.
I want to meet your son so bad because I'm obsessed with geography and flags. I had a flag book, had a world map, and every single day I'd write it down. I was obsessed.
Well,
I wonder if he would know the flag behind me. This is
100%. Like I'm sure 100%. So as soon as we log off here, I'm going to go holler for him to come in here and so he can talk to you. So we'll just go ahead and wrap up. And like I said, we'll be in touch and be in contact. And thank you so much for your time today, Mateo. I mean,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're just such a valuable leader in our community, in our autistic community. And so proud to have you here today. So thank you. Such an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we'll talk to you soon.